Hey, Franchise Secrets. Today I have my friend Cameron Herold on. Cameron's been on multiple times. He's one of my all-time favorite guests. He just gives so much value as soon as he starts talking. He shared something that he's never shared in public before. It may or may not have been something legal or illegal that they did at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, but it changed the course of their franchise. And it started out with a group of unhappy franchisees. What did they do? How did they do it? And what was the outcome? I hope you enjoy the show.
Representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Van Horn.
Cameron, welcome back to the show, man.
Hey, Erik, good to see you. Thanks very much for having me.
Absolutely. So I was so excited when you said yes to coming on again. I know you got all kinds of things to do, people that you're talking to, people that you're interviewing. But when I think of my audience and probably the thing that they need the most, franchisees and franchisors, is that second level or second in command person. They need that operator. They need, because we got a bunch of visionaries, a bunch of, founders. And so I wanted to jump into it with you and just let's help some franchisees and franchisors out with that second in command. So,
okay. I've got to give you a funny backstory that ties in perfectly with this then. Approximately 15 years ago, I was just leaving 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and as you know, I'd been the chief operating officer from 1-800-GOT-JUNK, from 12 locations up to 330 locations, 2 million to 106 million. I was in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was speaking at one of the events that Vern Harnish was holding. Vern was the founder of Gazelles and Scaling Up. He was the founder of the Entrepreneurs Organization. So many people know who Vern Harnish is and the organizations he's built. And I was standing on a stage, and I came off this big stage to about 400 or 500 people. And as I got off the stage, this guy walked up to me and he said, "Oh my God, you're Cameron." And I went, "Yeah, why?" And he goes, "I thought you were a saying." I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I thought you were like a BHAG or a flywheel or like a core purpose. Like, I thought you were a thing." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "For the last 3 days, all of these CEOs have been walking around this conference saying, 'I need a Cameron.'" And I realized that they were saying they needed someone like Brian Scudamore had, the CEO of 1-800-GOT-JUNK, had you as his second in command. They wanted someone like you. And I kind of cracked up about it, but it really solidified for me what you're talking about today, which is that almost every single entrepreneur out there needs their yin and yang. They need their counterpart. It's like a guy needs to have a partner. Like, we just work better with partners and spouses and friends. Like, it's just, anyway, so yeah, I get it. Every franchisor out there is going to grow. And that's why really Brian scaled 1-800-GOT-JUNK so quickly, as we were able to divide and conquer. I was that COO. I had also built 2 franchise companies prior to that. I had been the second in command for what's now called Gerber Auto Collision in the United States and Boyd Auto Body in Canada. And then prior to that, I was in a very senior leadership role for what became College Pro Painters. And I opened the West Coast of the United States for them. So I had that kind of DNA and experience. So there we go.
So your background, second in command, entrepreneurial too. So very entrepreneurial, second in command, which is pretty unique, I think, at least. How have you evolved over the years? Because you've written some great books, from Free PR to Double Double to Second in Command. Like, how has your philosophy changed at all with Second in Command? How have you evolved from helping people with Second in Command from the time that you left 1-800-GOT-JUNK to today?
Well, the way I've evolved is what I've done in terms of helping entrepreneurs. So my core purpose is to help entrepreneurs make their dreams happen, or help franchisors make their dreams happen, like what you're doing. One of the ways I used to do that was I used to coach CEOs. I used to coach leadership teams. I still do some of that. I have a course that I launched called Invest in Your Leaders, which actually I've got some franchisors and big companies putting franchisees and managers through that Invest in Your Leaders course to get the core skills that they need to actually scale and lead people and lead teams. So that's something I launched 3 years ago that's having really big shifts in companies. And then 6-7 years ago, I launched something called the COO Alliance, which is a mastermind community, kind of like the International Franchisor or the IFA for franchisors. This is an association where only the second in commands are allowed to join, no CEOs, and it's only the second in commands of companies from 17 countries. We've added about 35 new members in the last 6 weeks alone. So we have this great organization that I'm coaching them, growing them, and they're masterminding and connecting with each other. And that's helping these brands grow. I think where my shift is very different from most COOs, you kind of mentioned that I'm very entrepreneurial as a COO. When you're looking to bring a second in command into your company, you have to make sure that the person you're bringing in is a good cultural fit for you as the CEO. I would have been a horrible second in command for most of my members of the COO Alliance's companies. In fact, I would probably be a horrible second in command for 80% of the franchisors that you actually work with or that are in your networks, because I don't necessarily match the skills that CEO is weak in. I don't necessarily match the areas of the business that CEO wants me to run. Maybe I don't match their culture. Maybe they don't like somebody who swears once in a while or is so entrepreneurial. I was a perfect match for Brian for that 6.5 years that I was scaling it. So it's a really kind of idiosyncratic role that people are looking for.
So let's help some franchisors and franchisees out, because that can be a contentious relationship at times, and it can be a very win-win, very helpful relationship where they help each other and they're better together. But there's kind of a phase that franchisees and franchisors go through. Really, the franchisees go through with a franchisor, from being really happy and excited when they buy, and then at some point they're really disappointed, and then it's all about them, and then they get to this stage where it's collaborative.
Well, and you know who documented that perfectly was a guy named Greg Nathan. Documented that about 20 years ago, and it was called The 6 Stages of Franchising. I made sure that we taught all of our franchisees that in all the franchisor organizations where I've coached the CEO and COO. I've taught them this. It's basically the glee, fee, me, see, and we stages, I think they are. So that it's very similar actually to humans. Every human has parents. In the first 1 year that we are a child, we love our parents. They wipe our butt, they feed us, they put us to bed, they cuddle us, they kind of give us everything we need for that first year of our life. We all are in the glee stage with our parents. And then all of a sudden, we're kind of in that terrible twos stage where we're saying no, and we're running around the house and we're driving our parents a little bit crazy. We're trying to kind of gain a little bit of independence. That's kind of like a franchisee too. And then as teenagers, you were the same, I was the same. I thought my parents were idiots when I was a teenager. You probably thought your parents were idiots, right? And then all of a sudden we move out of the house at 21 years old and we're like, well, I don't love my mom and dad as much as I say, I kind of do, but they're not as stupid as I thought I was. I'm not going to tell them they're not as stupid, but I kind of need to call mom and find out how to do laundry and how to make some food. Otherwise I'm going to die. So maybe she's not so bad, but I'm not going to pretend that. And then you kind of have your first kids and you're like, wow, I get it. My mom and dad really tried their best. I think I'm going to try to rebuild that relationship with my parents. And then all of a sudden you kind of mature and you're a little bit older and you're a little bit wiser. Maybe you're in your 40s or your 50s, and you really start to get that relationship with your parents is pretty special, and you really want to start to reconnect with them. My parents have passed away now, and I really wish that I could reset some of the relationship issues that we had when we were teenagers. That's similar to the franchisee-franchisor. The natural life cycle that a franchisee and franchisor goes through, as you started with, is every franchisee, when they buy the franchise, is super happy. They're really excited. They're super pumped up. And then they get the manual, maybe in the mail, and they look at it and they're like, holy shit. And they start getting a little bit overwhelmed. And then they realize it's a lot harder than they thought it was going to be. And they remember the franchisor saying it was going to be tough, but they kind of thought they were pretty special and they were going to be able to take it off really easily. And then they realize, wow, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. And they kind of want to start making it up on their own because they're kind of entrepreneurial. So they start reinventing the wheel and figuring out their own systems. And none of those systems are in the manual. And they start clashing with the franchisor a little bit. And then they're like, why am I paying you a royalty when I'm doing all the hard work? And they forget that the royalty is kind of like a 20-year tax. because you can't charge the $1 million up front, but they're kind of a little bit frustrated around that. And then they kind of mature and they get older and wiser. And they're like, some of your systems are pretty darn good, but some of mine are okay too. But maybe, they kind of go through that evolution. If a franchisee can very quickly get to the adult, the 40-year-old adult, where they realize the franchisor is going to give them the best systems that they know, the franchisor is going to try to be there to help them as much as they can. The franchisor really does have their best interest at heart. In fact, the only way the franchisor really makes money is if your revenues grow, so they make more royalty. If you're making a lot of profit and royalty and revenue so that you validate well and tell lots of other people about it. If you're super happy and growing and you buy more locations, so they're completely aligned with your success. Very similar to parents. They really want to grow you so you're a happy, healthy, independent kid and you can move out of the house and have your own children and they can be proud of you and you can be friends again. That's kind of the same job. So as soon as you can get to the stage where you realize if you can hold hands with your franchisor, take the best systems they've got, work really hard, try to be nice to each other, I think you're going to be much more successful as a franchisee. And if the franchisors can teach that, even if they take Greg Nathan's 6 Stages of Franchising article, it's only like a 2-page article. I'm sure you've seen it. If you teach that to everybody, like I would reteach it to franchisees every 6 months. Keep remembering that that's what you're going through. It makes everybody's life easier. That's a long answer, but I think it's an important one.
Attention, franchisors and franchisees. There are 2 really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is if you're a franchisor and you're frustrated that you're not awarding as many franchises as you thought you would, this is the reason I created the Franchisor Mastermind. If you want access to the information, the techniques that the best franchise sales organizations are using to award franchises, and you want what mature brands have with their playbook of having happy, successful franchisees that grow the right way, then you might want to check out the Franchisor Mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections. They want the playbook to achieve both short-term and long-term success. They want to increase enterprise value in their brand. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com. No, I think it's super important. I think we need to create something for the franchisors stages as they evolve as a franchisor, because some of these new franchisors, founders, they created they have a successful, business. They franchise it. They have success bringing in franchisees, and they think they're going to be the exception to the rule, and the franchisees are going to love them because the first stage is glee. All these franchisees are happy. They leave training very happy, and then the work starts, and then they have different ideas. I think I would do this different. I would put a plant here. I would change the logo for this. I would want to have this type of social media. I want to do all of these things different. I want to get different types of product in my location. So then the franchisor, the founder's thinking, oh my gosh, I've got these franchisees now that are pushing back on everything that I do. And then the franchisors start to give in. I'll help you with this. I'll help you with that. And all of a sudden that does not really satisfy that next stage of when these franchisees want to start changing everything. What do you tell a franchisor and a franchisee that find themselves in that situation?
It's hard. I heard a data point around 22 years ago when we were in our first, probably 20 franchisees sold. I heard a data point that most franchisors never sell more than 7 or 8 units. And it's because they get their first 7 or 8 sold based on the dream and the vision and the excitement and based on that one location that maybe they were doing pretty well with. And then all of a sudden, those 7 or 8 franchisees start struggling and they aren't doing very well. And they don't validate very well. And they don't sell very many more. And everybody's frustrated and there's not enough royalty revenue to support them. And it's hard to go to that next level. So kind of in that growth stage from 7 to maybe 30 franchises that are operating, that are hitting profitability, obsess about making sure your franchisees are happy. Obsess about making sure your franchisees are profitable. It's about less is more, right? The critical few versus the important many. Make sure that the franchisees are doing the basic things that are going to get them to success, and don't try to build more and add more. Keep working hard to help them get successful, because it's those core things that'll build the foundation. I remember years ago, we had a franchisee, Mark Rubin in Washington, D.C., call us, and he was really wanting the next big marketing tactic. And I said, are you parking all of your trucks in high visibility areas? He goes, no, but I know we have to. But I need the next marketing tool. And I said, are you putting out signs all over the city on the weekends? No, I know we have to, but I need the next marketing tool. And I said, are you putting out 5 door hangers on each side of every job you do and 10 across the street? No, but I know we will, but I need the next marketing tool. And I said, I'm not giving you marketing tactic number 4 until you're doing the first 3 every single day. And it was about kind of having a little bit of that tough love and reinforcing those initial systems that we knew worked. That was core. The second one was, I think it's important in College Pro Painters, we said we had to have our hand in the paint can. We had to be painting houses like our franchisees were. It's very, very critical that franchisors operate their own corporate locations in a couple of different markets. And I want you in a tough market. I want you in a winter market. I want you in an expensive market. I want you in an African-American market. And your systems need to work in all of those markets to high levels of profitability, only following the proper systems and the proper budgets and the proper P&L that you expect your franchisees to. And if you can nail that, they're going to be successful. The third part, and this is a story I think I've only ever told once before, you really have to listen to your franchisees and really, really, really listen to them to understand their problems. Brian and I got a tip one day. We only had about 20 franchisees, and we heard that they were very, very unhappy. They were in that stage where they were pissed off. They weren't getting what they needed. They were struggling. They were the terrible teenagers that were trying to bust loose and say, F you to mom and dad. And we heard they were doing a conference call. So we hopped on the conference call. And one of the members of the conference call said, I think there's 11 people on the call right now. And Brian and I were like, and then all of a sudden that person said, no, it must be the conference call line. I think we can proceed. And for 1 hour, Brian and I said nothing, and we listened, and we really, really freaking listened. And we got off that call with 10 core things that the franchisees were really pissed off about. Most of them were pretty legit. A couple of them were like, you know what, you guys are idiots. But they were things that they were frustrated about. So Brian and I made a list of all the things that we could do to very quickly take care of the 10 things, including the couple that we thought they were crazy about. And we took care of them. And we never told the franchisees that we knew about the call. We never told the franchisees we were listening to the call. And all we did was listen and care and do what they wanted that would help them be successful. I guess that would be like, that's really aggressively. It's kind of like a parent who's eavesdropping on their kids inside the bedroom. There's nothing illegal about it, and you're doing it for the good of the kids, but that's how much listening you have to do as the franchisor. So that's probably the second time I've told the story. I don't think I've ever told the story publicly. I think we called it Project Red Dog. I don't remember why we called it Project Red Dog, but it was all about obsessively caring about how happy our franchisees were going to be, so that if they were happy, if they were profitable, then they would scale. And most franchisors won't do that. Most franchisors will blame the others. They'll say, my kids are idiots. My kids are stupid. My kids aren't doing what I tell them. And they forget that it's a partnership. In fact, it's such a partnership that we never called them franchisees. We called them franchise partners. We didn't even call them FPs. We called them franchise partners. Like, we wouldn't reduce it. We wouldn't shorten it. It was always franchise partners, and we never thought of them as our customer. Some franchisors think of the franchisee or the franchise partner as their customer. Our customer was the homeowner or end user that was getting the junk removed or getting their house painted or getting their car fixed. Our partner was the franchisee in taking care of our customer.
How important is that? It's a simple tweak, that internal language that nobody else is going to hear about unless they're eavesdropping. So no one would ever do that. So, how important is that internal language? Because you could say, I see them as franchise partners, but you can call them, my troubled children, or you're using that parent-child thing. Like, talk about that.
I think it's critical. I think that, the English language or any language that we speak in is intentionally designed to communicate what I'm thinking to what you're receiving. I was listening to Elon Musk talk about Neuralink and how what's happening now is we're going to be able to transfer exact data back and forth without any confusion. I think it's critical that you call someone, like, mean what you say what you mean, call them a franchise partner. We wouldn't shorten the name 1-800-GOT-JUNK. We never called it Got Junk. We never called it Junk. We didn't say GJ. We spelled it out. Even when I type a text message to Brian to this day, and I sent one about 2 weeks ago, I still type out 1-800- all caps got - all caps junk ? Like, it was all intentional. And I think it's intentional is, do you care about the people? If you care about them, right? If it's, College Pro Painters, our core values were respect the individual, pride in all you do, deliver what you promise. Those were our 3 core values. Well, respect the individual and pride in all you do meant I would call them franchise partners, not those people or whatever. Like, it's intentional that it's how you show up, and it's how they receive you.
I think this is encouraging for franchisees and franchisors. Early in 1-800-GOT-JUNK ? History, they had franchisees that were not happy. They had franchisees that wanted to do things differently. And people think about 1-800-GOT-JUNK and Brian as a leader today, and it's just a massive success story. He hasn't sold to private equity. He's just, it's just a really big success story. But they had those early challenges. So franchisees and franchisors, I think it's like that's the model. It's probably going to happen to every franchise system out there.
Well, I'll give you a couple points on this. So first off, 1-800-GOT-JUNK today is a $750 million company, still wholly owned, no private equity money, no outside investors. But it takes a long time to get to the night before you become an overnight success story, right? People think it's going to be really easy. I joined Brian in October of 2000. He had 12 franchises sold. He was doing $2 million in system-wide sales. Okay, October of 2000. How many years do you think he'd been in business before October of 2000?
4.
11. He started in 1989, had grown the company to 2 million in 11 years. So people think, I'll start a location, I'll franchise it 18 months later. You have no business franchising your business after 18 months. You need to be extraordinarily profitable. You need to have everything documented. You need to have tried and failed and opened in multiple cities. Most franchisors start franchising because they're not making enough money off one location to run enough corporate locations. And they're doing themselves a disservice and the franchisees a disservice. Brian had been in business for 11 years, operating multiple trucks in multiple markets. One summer he did a test in, I think, 12 cities, hiring. I went into a College Pro Painters office and hired Paul Guy away from College Pro to come and work for Brian to oversee, I think, 12 franchises in the summer markets as the Rubbish Boys. And he operated these 12 summer markets and proved he got 10 or 11 of the 12 to be successful in 4 months. He proved the model. Then he started to franchise, and he got Paul Guy and Derek Laderante to be his first franchisee. They were both former College Pro Painters franchisees. They'd done it before. They'd proven it before. They drove across Canada and opened up Toronto. Paul Guy is now about $50 million in system-wide sales. He owns all of Australia and New York City and all of Toronto. But he had proven experience. I, as a franchisor, I don't talk about this very often, but I had been a franchisee for 3 years before I started working at the auto body business and before I started with Brian. So I understood the franchisee's pain. I understood the franchisee-franchisor relationship. I was so terrified of failing at 20 years old when I bought my first franchise that I read the 360-page operations manual and I did everything it said obsessively. I was a complete monomaniac. If it said yellow keychain, I had a yellow keychain, man. If it said like brown bracelets, I'm wearing brown bracelets. Like, I didn't care how stupid it was. If the manual said it, I would do it because I was so terrified of failure. But out of 365 franchisees in Canada, I ranked number 3 or number 4 in that first year because I was so scared of failing that I just did what they told me. And I was entrepreneurial, but I didn't want to try my own systems because I knew that their systems were going to be the best that they knew about. And I kind of trusted that if something new came along, they'd tell me because they would want me using the next best system because it would grow the revenue and grow their profitability, right? Like, kind of made sense. So I was so scared. And I think if franchisees can embrace that and trust that you're in this partnership, a franchise partnership, I think you'll be so much more successful. And I think if franchisors would obsess about their franchisee profitability. So here's one of the things I did in the first 2 weeks I was COO at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. I told Brian that he wasn't making money, the company wasn't making money, the franchisees weren't making money, and the guys in the trucks weren't making money. I said, we're raising prices by 40%. Everybody thought I was crazy. I had leadership team members think we were going to go bankrupt. I'm like, we're going bankrupt anyway. So we're going to raise our prices from $338 a full truck. We raised our prices in one day from $338 a full truck to $478 a full truck in a single day. And that gave us the ability for everybody to make money because I knew that franchisees were going to work really, really, really hard. And if they couldn't get to a cash flow break even quickly and get to profitability quickly and replace their corporate income quickly, they weren't going to be happy. So we had to become that premium. So it was because I obsessed about them. One last lesson on this. One of the first month or two that I was at the company, a franchisee in Ottawa, Canada, Pierrette Raymond, and her husband, Luke, were really struggling. They hadn't yet hit profitability. Both of them had quit their jobs and were trying to run the business. They weren't making ends meet. They had 2 very young kids, and they were terrified of failing. So every day, Pierrette would phone me at 8 a.m. or 7:30 a.m. Vancouver time, and she would give me her top 3 goals for the day, marketing-wise, things that she was specifically going to do for that day. We called it the Kick-Ass Marketing Program, CAMP. And every morning she'd give me her top 3 marketing goals. At the end of the day, she would call me and tell me where she hit or failed on the goals, and I would coach her on what to do the next day. She'd think about it overnight, and in the morning, she'd call me back and commit to her top 3. We did it for 1 month. And then we started doing it weekly for about 3 months. And Pierrette Raymond is today, 24 years later, a very successful franchisee for 1-800-GOT-JUNK, millions of dollars in revenue. But it was because I cared about her to the extent that I was going to coach her twice a day for a month and every single week. That was way outside of what the normal royalty revenue would pay for. But I knew that if I cared about her profitability, she'd validate well, everything would be happier. So I was worried about them more than I was worried about us.
And were they like ready to do that? Or was there pushback? Like, this isn't going to work? Were they just like hungry like you were just to follow the system? Or were they, a bit more?
They were mad at us because they expected more. They expected that we'd run national marketing or national advertising. And I had to explain we're broke. We don't have any money. Like, we can't do this. And we never promised it. So I had to really hold the mirror up and make sure they could see it. And I had to give them the things that they could get success with on a daily basis and work on. The other thing that I did was I really worked hard to grow the capacity and the mindset of our franchisees. So I remember Paul Guy, again from Toronto, when I joined 1-800-GOT-JUNK, he was doing around $800,000 in revenue. He was doing about 40% of the system-wide sales of the company, of the 12 franchisees. Like 9 were open at that time. And I said to Paul, what would your business look like if you were doing $5 million in revenue? And he's like, you are crazy. There's no way I could do that. You're insane. It'll never happen. So I sent him this very simple Excel spreadsheet. And I said, just for fun, over the weekend, just for shits and giggles, pretend that you were running a $5 million business and kind of map it out using this model and come back Monday and let's talk about it. Maybe we can get you to 2 million, but let's pretend you're doing 5. He came back Monday morning and he had the model for 5 million sketched out using the budget template that I gave him. And he said, I think it's possible. Can you coach me? So because I raised his mindset and raised his vision, I raised him to be open to me coaching him. Sure enough, Paul Guy not only got to the 5 million in revenue a few years later, but he's doing about 50 million today. And he's making about $10 million in profit every year because we cared again about him and his growth and his mindset. And it was all of the systems that are in my Invest in Your Leaders course that I coached franchisees in. They weren't systems that were in the manual. These were systems that I'd created or I'd been taught years before at other companies. but it was stuff that if I cared about helping them, they were going to be successful. And I think, again, the franchisors that think of their franchise partners as partners, they'll really work harder to make sure they're successful. And if the franchise partners, remember, the franchisor is there as your partner. They're not there as your parent. They're not there as the cop. They're not there as your adversary. They're not trying to screw things up. Everybody's going to be more happy and more successful.
Share a little bit about Invest in Your Leaders course, and then I want to ask you a follow-up question to something we were talking about earlier.
Sure. So at College Pro Painters, and again, what most people don't know about College Pro operated for 50 years. It closed down last year because they couldn't find enough franchisees. All the franchisees were university students, and all university students that are running businesses are doing online businesses and crypto and flipping stuff now. So they had to go out and find 800 franchisees every year. So in 4 months, College Pro would find 800 franchisees, and in 1 month, we'd train the 800 franchisees to hire 8,000 painters. So the complexity of that business was all around interviewing, recruiting, onboarding, and the training of people. The training of the franchisees was critical. Remember, we only had 4 months to train 800 franchisees on how to build a business, start a business, run a business, sales, marketing, operations, hire 10 people each, do time management, project management, negotiate, conflict management. Like, we had to train them to be leaders of companies. And then 4 months later, they'd shut the business down after we do 60 million in revenue. So we became operationally world-class at training young managers at how to be very skilled leaders. I took all of those skills and bundled them into now what is called the Invest in Your Leaders course. It's investinyourleaders.com. It has the 12 core skills that anybody who manages people, whether it's a CEO, a COO, a VP, franchisee, whatever, they need to be really good at, and nobody gets trained in. So it's stuff like interviewing, coaching, delegation, time management, situational leadership, handling conflict, email management, communication. It's like the core skills that we need to be good at. And I bundled that course up with me teaching the video content, some written content, pre and post tests, and then there's a LinkedIn certification that you get when you've gone through all the modules. And it's priced at only $740 per person. So it's kind of a rounding error in terms of the value that you get. That's the same content that I trained Kimball Musk in 1993, a year and a half before he and his brother Elon Musk raised their first round of funding for Zip2, and they had one employee, and they were funded based on Kimball Musk's leadership experience at College Pro Painters, because Elon had never done anything. So those skills are proven. I also trained his cousin, Peter Reeve, who went on to build Solar City, in those same 12 leadership skills.
I love it. People, I mean, that's the easy button for franchisees out there. Like, that's the easy button for your key people. All right, let's go back. You were talking about where you went on that call with some unhappy franchisees. Looking back, if you knew the outcome was positive because you came away with 10 things that you were able to have impact in, what would you do today if you weren't alert? You knew you had unhappy franchisees, but they weren't having a call. How would you facilitate something to learn the same thing?
So we actually created a system the year following that so that we could proactively gather feedback from our franchisees and our employees and our customers. And we used the Net Promoter Score. So the Net Promoter Score is a survey that you send out typically to customers, and you ask one question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how enthusiastically would you recommend our service to a friend? So with franchisees, we would send out one question. We would say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how enthusiastically would you recommend this franchise opportunity to a friend? And we would take the percentage of people that give us a 9 and 10, they're the promoters. You subtract the percentage of people that give you a 1 through 6, those are your detractors, and you end up with a result of somewhere between negative 100% and positive 100%. In my second last year at the company, we were rated the #1 franchisor in the world by the IFE. We had a positive 97 or 98% Net Promoter Score at the time. But on the thank you page of that survey, this was the gold. On the thank you page of that one question survey, we had, thanks for your result. What's one thing we could do to make this an even better franchise opportunity for others? And we took the most common things that they said, and we would put that in place. We did that survey twice a year. The second time we did the survey each year, so the first time we said, what's one thing we could do to make it a better franchise opportunity? The second time, so you usually asked it in January and July. On the July question, we would say, what's one thing we can do that doesn't cost money? And listening to the franchisees gave us all of the answers. It's kind of like when we're little, if you grew up in like a family that celebrated Christmas, you'd write a Christmas card or Christmas note to Santa, like, "Dear Santa, I would like these 3 presents." And you'd walk down to the mailbox, you'd mail the letter to Santa, and 6 weeks later, the presents are under the tree. Like, "Santa read my letter." It's like, no, your mom read the letter. Like, Santa doesn't even exist. Mom and dad read your letter. They bought you what you wrote on the letter. So for us, it was like, let's just ask, instead of trying to figure out what they want, let's ask them what they want. It's like, hey, what will make you more profitable? What will make you happier? What will make you more successful? Take the wisdom of the crowds, like Malcolm Gladwell talked about, and just do what they want. So we systemized that process, and we did it twice a year for employees, for franchise partners, and for customers.
So when is a franchisor ready, or should they be ready to hire a C-level COO? They're like, when should that make that leap? What kind of price range are they looking at, and what can they expect from that?
Great question. I'm going to give you 2 parts to answer to this. So when you should be ready to hire a COO is when you have got the need for a COO. So really what you're looking for is a head of operations or a second in command. It's going to be your counterpart to the entrepreneur. So it could be a COO, it could be a vice president of operations, it could be a director of operations, could be an operations manager. It's really the person who's going to take all the operations off your plate. So for me at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, I ran franchise sales, marketing, PR. At one point, the call center reported to me, corporate operations, field operations, franchise training, and Brian ran IT and finance. So when I originally came into the organization, my title was vice president of operations, and then it changed to COO. A C-level person 20 years ago, to get a chief operating officer title or a chief marketing officer or a chief financial officer, chief information officer, chief technology officer, you had to be a major player at a major company. Really what you're looking for is a basket of things that need to get done, and what are you willing to pay for that? So a true COO today is someone who brings in a lot of strategic insight into the company, like I brought into 1-800-GOT-JUNK, right? I'd already built 2 franchise companies, and I'd built a 3rd organization, the fast growth that we took public. Someone who has good P&L responsibility. Again, I'd built 3 organizations, had P&L responsibility, could understood the budget and balance sheet. Somebody who actually has a huge level of autonomy, so they can just come in and do their job. For the first 4 years, I was showing Brian what I was going to do for the year, and he's like, "Great, go do it. I don't know how to do any of that." He wasn't delegating to me. He wasn't managing me. He wasn't holding me accountable. I was coming in saying, "I got it. Here's the plan. And you just show me the vision." So there's that level of autonomy. The 4th is that the person comes in with a level of like insight and people that they can bring into the organization. So I was recruiting people into 1-800-GOT-JUNK. I was recruiting people away from College Pro. That's a true kind of C-level person. And then lastly, it's based on the roles and responsibilities they have and the metrics they have and the amount of money that you're willing to pay. When I was the chief operating officer for 1-800-GOT-JUNK 20 years ago, I was being paid over $300,000 a year. So if you're not going to pay someone $300,000 a year today, they certainly aren't a COO. Maybe they're a director. Like if you're going to pay $150,000, they're probably a director of operations. If you're going to pay $250,000, they're probably a vice president of operations. If you're $350,000, they're probably a true COO, if they're also doing those other things. So don't put a title, and I talk about this in my book, The Second in Command, for all areas of the business. Don't put a title on the person until you understand their strategic P&L, roles, responsibilities, metrics, and what you're willing to pay, and then put the proper title on the person at that time.
Remote versus in office for that $300,000 plus person.
I'm old school, man. I got the gray hairs. Like I still have a huge desire to have the person in the office with me. So this afternoon, I'm in Kelowna, British Columbia. I'm interviewing the second in command for Dan Martell. So Dan Martell runs Martell Media and the SaaS Academy. And I'm in Dan Martell's offices in Kelowna, British Columbia. I can see the mountains and Lake Okanagan right here. And his COO, Todd Melnick, is in the same office. I was hiking with Todd 2 days ago. I don't think you can replace that in person, the beta share going back and forth, being around the same culture. I think if you truly, truly care about an organization, you want your leadership team as close to the queen bee, as close to that buzz and hive as possible. And I don't think you can do that remote. I'm okay with having remote employees, with fractional, with remote team members, but I truly think the leadership team has to be as close to the buzz as possible. And I think you want franchise partners coming in and seeing that and feeling that as well. Brian and I were best friends. Prior to me joining Brian as his COO at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, he was my best man at my wedding 3 months before. We would go for runs together every Tuesday and Thursday. We'd go offsite to our tennis clubs together and just sit and do work on Fridays. We lived 7 minutes apart from each other. You can't replace that synchronicity and the communication and the connection and the trust that happens. So I don't think you're going to get anywhere close to as good a connection and results with a remote hire as your second in command.
So talk to the franchise or the founder that hired a director of ops or VP of ops or maybe a COO. They realize they probably gave a title too early. They've outgrown that person. That person really has a better role in the company with probably a lesser title.
Yeah.
What's a founder to do?
So first off, it depends on the state or province or country that you're in, but there's something called constructive dismissal. And when you change a person's title or you change a person's roles and responsibilities, there can be legal ramifications for you as a company. So you want to at least make sure that you have some, because the person quit their job or joined you or took a position or dedicated themselves based on the title and roles and responsibilities and comp that you gave them. If you made a mistake, oops, but you kind of sometimes have to ante up for that mistake. So I would check to see if there's anything around constructive dismissal if you're going to change the title. Either way, I would still change the title. So I was coaching a company in Florida one year. Actually, I coached them for 4 years, from 40 employees up to 600 employees. It's called Blue Grace Logistics. And when we got to about 600 employees, we realized that there were a bunch of people that were there in the first year or so that were early stage employees that got VP titles, that once we got to 600 people, they weren't VPs. They were like director level with VP titles, or they were VP titles that weren't being paid enough. So in a single day, we took all 600 people in a spreadsheet. We looked at roles and responsibilities, comp, metrics they were responsible for, strategic insight, P&L responsibility, and we retitled 600 people at once. And with some people got the same title, some got increased to C-level, some got dropped to director, some got moved to manager, but we had clarity around managers, directors, VPs, C-level, and we retitled everybody. We ripped off the Band-Aid. So I think if you made a mistake, rip off the Band-Aid. And you can go and sit with a person and say, hey, when I hired you, this is what I thought. This is what I now know. I love you. I want to keep you, but we're retitling and explaining. And sometimes it's about being a little bit strategic, but you have to rip off that Band-Aid and do it now. And then I think employers can't be as sloppy as we used to be. Employers are often a little bit sloppy. They're like, oh, titles don't matter. Really? Titles really matter. Because a person is now sitting at their desk going, well, I'm a COO. Let me look at Indeed at what COOs are paid. Let me check on Glassdoor what COOs are paid. Let me look at Google at what COOs are paid. Oh, COOs are paid $400,000 a year and they do this. And the COO is going, yeah, but you're not really a COO. Then why did you give them the title? So mean what you say and say what you mean. Put the title on people based on their roles and responsibilities, metrics, right? Exactly what we've gone through. And I think everything gets easier. This is why franchisors need mastermind communities and need coaches and need advice. You're going to make all of the mistakes. And by the way, I can't stand the whole saying of failing is good. Forget that, man. Why would you want to fail when I've learned all these mistakes already and I can save you from all that agony and all the mistakes and all the legal and all the issues and all the problems? Do what Erik is teaching you. Do what Greg Nathan's teaching you. Do what I can teach you. Do what's in the Invest in Your Leaders course. Follow what's in the second command. Don't learn from mistakes. Learn from the people before you that have already figured it out. My R&D stands for rip off and duplicate. I just do what the best people were doing. The reason I was so successful at 1-800-GOT-JUNK was I did everything that I used to do at College Pro Painters. College Pro was the largest residential house painting company on the planet. Then we built Gerber Auto Collision and Boyd Auto Body, which became the largest collision repair chain on the planet. And then I was the COO for 1-800-GOT-JUNK, which became the largest junk removal company on the planet. There were 17,000 independent junk removal companies when I joined Brian. So it's by ripping off and duplicating and taking the best of what others are doing that can help you be successful, including anybody watching or listening today.
founders start out as entrepreneurs, a small business owner, one location, one truck. Then they grew and they have multiple locations or multiple trucks, probably a multi-million-dollar business. They become a franchisor, and now they're at that point where they probably should be hiring that operations person or that killer operations person. Yet they still think of themselves as that younger entrepreneur that has been grinding and being in that ops role. Now they're starting to realize there are probably people that can do it better than they can, and their zone of genius may not seem that important, like strategy or vision. Talk to that founder.
Yeah. So what happens is when you're working in your zone of genius or your unique ability, you kind of discount it. You're like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's kind of like the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys who just fucking throws a long bomb 55, 60 yards. He's like, yeah, no big deal. I do it all the time. No, it's a big deal. You're the Dallas Cowboys quarterback. No one else on the planet can do this. It's a really big deal. It's like the entrepreneur who's like so good at strategy because it just comes easy to me. That's a really big deal. For me, I've been rated as one of the best keynote speakers on the planet. I've been paid to speak in 29 countries. I'm a very, very successful business coach. And I kind of go, yeah, but it comes easy to me. I forget that it's not easy for 99% of the other humans out there. So what you want to do is delegate everything except genius. Get everything off your plate so that you're working in that zone of genius. You're working in your unique ability. You're working in stuff that's really easy for you, that you love doing, that's super fun for you. Hell, you'd do it for free, except you got to pay bills once in a while. Then everything gets simple. The entrepreneurs that are working hard, that are grinding it out, that are struggling, you're slowing your own business down. You're hurting your own profitability. So what you want to be able to do as an entrepreneur, as a franchisor that's scaling, is not to be so busy that you're working. You don't want to be like that fly trying to get out the window, working hard all the time. You want to have lots of free time to be able to sit back and think, to be strategic, to listen to podcasts, to go to mastermind events, to go through courses, to plug into books, to work with coaches, so that you can see the business from a completely different lens and perspective, so that you can come back in with clarity and work on the right areas of the business and making sure people are working on the right things. Do you know that when There Got Junk, for the first 4 years we were there, we only had probably 5 or 6 pieces of marketing collateral. That's it. 5 or 6 total. Because we were so clear that what we needed to focus on wasn't more of things. It was people using the right things. And it was that time that we had to just be clear. So yeah, I think the franchisor that is worried, I don't really like, what am I going to do if I delegate all this? Well, the other thing is you'll have a better life. You'll have some fun. You'll reconnect with your hobbies, because at the end of the day, this isn't just about making money. It's not about building a big brand. It's also about, at the end of the day, we die, right? I'm going tomorrow morning. I fly to St. Louis to a very, very close friend of mine of 17 years, his funeral, John Rulin. And, a 45-year-old that dies and leaves 4 kids behind. I assure you, he doesn't care what he was building with his business, right? Nor does his spouse and little girls.
100%. And I might see you there. John was a very good friend of mine, and it just puts things into perspective so fast. Like, what are we really building? And that's a great tie-in to, like, as an entrepreneur, what are you building and why are you building it? What's changed with you with that? I mean, that one event, like, what's literally changed with you? Because I could see a little something probably changed in you, Cameron.
From John, a couple things changed. One is he was very good at proactively reaching out to his friends over video to just say hi. Sometimes there was an ask. There was like, can I get a referral? How can I love on your clients? But it was like this proactive connecting with friends to just chat and say hi. And it was always over videos. There was a real human connection. So yesterday I called a mutual friend of ours, Kirk Drake, in Ashland, Oregon. I dropped in to see Kirk a month ago when I was driving through Ashland. I called. It's only the first time in my life I've done a video call with Kirk, and I've known him for 17 years as well. So that's changed with me, is wanting to connect with people. I think another thing is just the reality that truly none of this stuff matters, right? And how important friends and family and health and stuff is. Like, I'll be 59 in 2 months, 14 years older than John, and I'll be damned if I want to leave my 2 young boys, 21 and 23, and my wife. And I've already sold everything, right? I sold my home, sold my cars. We've been traveling the world for 3 years, living as nomads. But yeah, I think that connection with friends and family and yeah, maybe just slowing it down, connecting with last night I went for a 45-minute walk before bed and took my shoes off and walked through the park in the grass and walked along the water and walked in the water with my shoes. I've never done that before, but I don't know. Fuck, it's hard, man.
It is
Freaking hard. He was such a good guy. And by the way, for everybody listening, go read the book Giftology. It's the book that John wrote. It will change you. Here's something weird. A friend of mine sent me a box of stuff 2 days ago. And it was like a bag and a hat and a pen and a cup and a shirt, all with their company logo on it. I don't want any of your shit with your logo on it. John would never send a gift out with his company logo. He would send you a beautiful knife with your name on it, or he'd send you a beautiful shirt with your name on it. Like he understood the connection of people. Anyway, I'm rambling. I just miss him.
Now go get the book Giftology. John has been on this podcast. He's been on so many podcasts. Just go Google him. Go check him out. It will change your business. I know franchisors that use Giftology.
Yeah.
So go check it out. Cameron, thanks for coming on again.
Hey, Eric, you're welcome. I love doing this. Every time I get a note from you about this, I'm like, it's a hell yes. It's a full body F yes. I would love to do this because I really, you're one of the random people. I think Greg Nathan, yourself, and there's not a lot of others out there in the franchisor space and franchisee space that actually care about both sides. And you legitimately do. And for me, that's what was important in me joining Brian at 1-800-GOT-JUNK was like, I didn't want to build something and not care about franchisees. And you do. And thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.